Good afternoon, Upper Sixth. Well, here we are, bullet point 6. Thank goodness we're at the end of this one. It's a great research theme, but as in previous years, my goodness, doesn't it go on. Anyway, this is just an overview. We'll do loads of exam style questions in class, and this last research theme, I think they're having a laugh. It could be pretty much anything from the entire A-level curriculum. I've put down here theme 2 and theme 3, but actually there's some theme 1 stuff in there. It could be anything, who knows? So this video is going to be long. I apologise. It's not the entire A-level. It's not even all of theme 2 and theme 3. So I'm not going to explain things in too much depth. We're going to skim over it. We're going to introduce some topics. There's a lorry load of case studies on here for you. Feel free to pause, try and answer the questions and get your study buddies or AI to mark it for you. If you're my students, I'm happy to mark them for you or with you. So we shall crack on. And here's Taylor Swift laughing at us for this one and quoting from Long Live 2010, "I had the time of my life fighting dragons with you." Well, this last bullet point feels like that dragon and she needs to stop laughing. So here's some of the things we're going to go through. I've covered most of these in this video, not all of them actually, and I've taken 2 out at the end. But there's a lot in there and we've covered some of this in other videos as well. So if we think about 2.4.1, introducing resource management. This was the first unit you did after February half term in the lower 6th for your theme 2. I'm about to start this next week with my lower 6th. And we can see we've got staffing, logistics, artist coordination, obviously a bit of context there. And then we're thinking about those larger venues and the independent venues. Without repeating, we understand that if you are bigger, if you've had, I don't know, Glastonbury since the 1970s, you've got loads of sales data. And my lower 6th in finance have talked a lot about the reliability and validity of data. And obviously the more we have, the more reliable maybe our forecasting is, as long as we don't have a global pandemic or something ridiculous. So actually these brand new venues that are set up by people that just love music, there's going to be a higher risk with them, and our good friend Igor Ansoff would agree. So think about those smaller venues. We've got economies of scale or not coming into this argument as well, and it's, you know, the big venues, they get the top talent, especially if they're being organised by Live Nation that have the contracts with the top talent and the ticket selling companies and the security cards and the merchandise companies. Think of that portfolio of products that they've built and you'll know why they're so big. So I've gone into the TIM report and also the other reports to try and find you examples again. It mentions Brexit, it talks about the hardship of small festivals, and I'll try not to repeat too much. So here's a case study with a 10 marker. So assess the impact, likely impact probably, of effective resource management. So this is our knowledge on the success of live music events. As impact of that on that standard format that you'll get. And we're talking about success factors. We would look for quantitative or qualitative success factors from the case study, because if you just write some rubbish like therefore leading to success, don't expect to get a good mark. We've got 30% increase over time. So this is costs. Obviously this is not going to lead to success if they can't actually sell enough tickets to cover these. So here, securing artists and suppliers up to 3 years in advance to mitigate uncertainty. So that's good resource management. And what you're doing is you're getting them locked into contracts, you know who's going to come, and therefore you've got less chance of them dropping out. And then when I rock up with my £400 ticket to Glastonbury, at least I can get a £20 beef burger. Okay, so there's lots of information there, plus you can do a bit of research you want to. Nice little question. Now, if we're moving on to capacity utilisation, it's hard to think of this exam paper without a capacity utilisation question. It is so important, it's unbelievable. That picture you see up there is Wembley, and every single seat will have different prices, but they all have money, they all have revenue. An empty seat will always give you £0. Now, if you're not filling stadiums, you've basically got a lower profit margin. Hopefully you can cover all your costs. I think Wembley is going to be very expensive to lease. Then you've got all the staff and the security, and you've got to pay the artists. So if you think about it, you're trying to maximise that revenue per seat. Now, if you've got half full stadiums, you're in the wrong stadium maybe, you need a smaller one. But also think about the impact that would have on the experience of being there as well. So there's a lot going on here. And these smaller venues, according to the stats, according to the research, they struggle to fill even the smallest of venues, and the customers are more price sensitive, so they won't be willing to pay £400 for a ticket. Okay, so all of those things are in there. We will practice calculating capacity utilisation as part of the essays in the classroom. It's going to be an important concept. I'll be amazed if there's not a capacity utilisation question in there. I'll guess this one as well. Eventually I'll get it right. So we can see that we have got experienced decline in attendance of 20% in these grassroots venues in London and Manchester. That's a decline from whatever it was before. And you've got Live Nations events in 2023 that were near 100% capacity. So actually, that's just amazing. And we could look at the pros and cons of 100% capacity. Lots of disappointed people who can't get there. They might go somewhere else, they might love somewhere else and never come back. And obviously the experience of another 20% in decline is less revenues, half-empty venues. And if you're borrowing a pub or something to do a little bit of a gig and they're not selling enough beer, maybe they're going to charge you more. Maybe they're going to charge you. So if your live music is being given away for free in some instances, they won't want you back if you're not helping them sell beer. Depends how terrible your venue is. So we've got another question here. There's some stats up there that you can have a look at. Read through the text here about the impact of underutilisation in context. So assess the importance, that's obviously the part of the hook, of capacity utilisation, the knowledge, in determining the financial success of live music venues. Well, you've got two different live music venues there. So if I was doing this question, I would be going large venues like O2 and Wembley, one answer, however. Smaller venues, yeah, grassroots venues in London and Manchester, impact, however. Overall, as an industry, looking at the large providers, I might have a different answer from the smaller ones. It could be that the smaller venues become more popular because of whatever factor. If it's in the case study, it's there for a reason. Okay, so stock control, really interesting. And in class, we've talked about how Marks and Spencer's got their stock ordering system wrong one year. Lovely summer range, sold out within minutes, well not minutes, within a couple of days, weeks of launching in the UK. Went to their Chinese manufacturers, asked for some more, and the Chinese said no. And as a result, Marks and Spencer's have some of their stuff that's harder to order or harder to forecast, sorry, because of seasonality, which is, I think, is a big part of this research thing. They relocated that to Spain. There's more flexibility in the supply chain. It's closer by miles. And the cheaper stuff that is their staple diets, the white t-shirts that we see Sheeran wearing there, that sort of stuff's still made in China. okay, or Bangladesh or somewhere like that, which is really cheap. And also it's easier to forecast demand for that. Okay, so we've got a link there into just-in-time inventory. The last thing you want is overproduction of Ed Sheeran's 2024 tour, because you can't really sell them next year in 2025. So you'll either give them away as consolation prizes, or you'll do a Gucci and set fire to them. I'm sure Ed Sheeran wouldn't set fire to his t-shirts. He's a lot more ethical, from what I read, than Gucci. So we've got Brexit delays, so bring your stuff closer to home. So, number one, he's British, so make your stuff at home if you can get it at a reasonable price. So he decided to bring it a bit closer, and actually, because it's closer, you can then order if and when, just in time, and all the benefits that we understand about overproduction, storage costs, and what I forgot to put on here is if it says Ed Sheeran 2024 on it, you can't take it to next year's concerts. Sell it retro on eBay, someone will buy it. So assess the impact of effective stock control on the profitability of live music events. Where we can see that you've got Ed Sheeran mentioned in there. It's a bit of a rejig of the green tick box, and it'd be quite easy to think about, if you didn't have enough t-shirts, what would the impact be on the profitability of your concert? People love to buy merch when they go to these things. We've got a secret room somewhere with brochures from concerts and plays, and we never look at them ever again, but each of them are about 20 odd quid each. So a bit more of a sad story here actually when we're talking about quality management, and we're talking about TQM, so that ongoing review of best practice to see if we can do a bit of Kaizen, continuous improvement. The problem is if you're not reviewing your processes, let's say you open up something, Astro World, and it's more popular than you expect, then you might not have the controls in place. And we know what happened with crowd surges, people getting injured, loss of reputation, and eventually they closed. So we've got a good example here from Glastonbury, which we talked about before. They had so many complaints about pollution and littering, and what a waste that these people are buying these disposable tents. I don't think you could get a disposable tent. I suppose they're cheap enough, they're disposable. And what they've done is they've focused on it, and they've turned this around into a USP, and they're now boasting about how environmentally friendly they are, which fits in with the brand image of some of the events that go on at Glastonbury. So really good turnaround, turning a problem, maybe was that threat? Maybe we'll do a bit of a SWOT on this, to an opportunity for the future. Internally, they were weak at controlling all of the rubbish and stopping people from doing it, and now they've got all the systems in place and the marketing strategy around it. We've got a bit of a strength. Didn't do SWOT in this one. Anyway, so we've got some quality management stuff for you to look through. There's some stuff in there about the Astro Festival without me going on about how many people were injured. And look, another one of Live Nations, hey, don't always get it right. Assess the impact of TQM on the long-term sustainability of live music events. Well, just those two tiny paragraphs, you've got two very good pieces of information, and you could easily get some howevers from that. Okay, so economic influences, we've got external factors, inflation rates, exchange rates, taxation, and obviously government spending on stuff to do with the music industry. Inflation has hit us all, and we know the definition of inflation in context with the basket of goods. My wages have definitely not kept up with inflation, and in real terms I'm poorer now than I was a couple of years ago. Exchange rates, well, if I live in France and I'm moving across the water to come and watch or listen to a concert, well, you've got that as well. There's currently VAT on concert tickets, which I didn't know. I presumed it was, but they're saying that that's really, really unfair. And the claim in some of the articles I was reading is it is much higher in the UK than most of Europe. Well, in the little diagram that I then Googled, I can see that actually we're on par with the lower part of Europe. There's not all of Europe there, but I think some of the competitor nations that we're talking about, not that I intend to go to, well, I don't know, quite fancy going to Italy, pop over to Italy, a bit warmer, and maybe watch a concert, but their VAT is slightly higher and they charge it on tickets. So music exports increased by 15%, but higher costs made international touring more expensive, reducing profits. It's very much an inflation question, and if that was linked to not being able to pass those costs on to customers through increased ticket prices, well, you might be able to do that if you're Taylor Swift. You can't do it if it's Dobby. Anyway, we're thinking, here's lots of quantitative information. I put this in here on purpose, so you could possibly do some maths with it. The double the EU average you've got there is concert tickets, not just VAT, which is, I've just realised what I've done with the error with the data extract. I do apologise. But luckily we've got the information from the Global Music Report. So if we think about it, we could do a difference between those two VAT figures. And yeah, you've got lots of different things there. So artist fees and security up by 30%. And then we could think about exports grew by 15%. And then think about the difference in VAT and what that could do. There's a lot you could do with that. Assess the impact of inflation, and I put in brackets others. This isn't part of the question. Just get ready for exchange rates or taxation or something like that. Inflation was going a bit mad when they were writing this paper, or just before. So you know, it could be an inflation question because there was a lot to talk about. On the UK live music industry, contribution to lowering unemployment. I thought I'd link that into one of those lovely macroeconomic objectives. This could be linked into increasing GDP. This could be increasing shareholder return on investment through dividends. There could be lots of different hooks that they could use for this. Lowering unemployment, I'd be thinking about local and national. It's an interesting hook. Probably not going to see that one in the exam paper. I was reading an overview of the Employment Rights Bill at the moment, and you'll see from this bit here that actually it's not law yet. So this is really hot off the press. Now there's a new piece of legislation hopefully coming through which looks at unsavoury practices of employers. So a couple of years ago we had 0-hour working regulations come in to stop companies like Next making people work on 0-hour contracts and not letting them have contracts of employment with other people. So when they didn't need them, people would starve. Might be a slight exaggeration, but not much. And things are getting better for the workers. Now this might not be better for the events companies that are looking for seasonal workers to come in for a couple of weeks. So if the employee's rights increase, maybe it's harder to dismiss people. Maybe it's harder to change their contracts when things get bad in your business. So there's lots of this sort of legislation's already in place, and it looks like they're going to make it a bit tighter in favour of the worker. So different bits of legislation when you did this unit at the end of the lower sixth. Consumer protection, well, we're thinking about fake tickets, more likely resale sites. Okay, there's legislation coming for that soon. Employee protection I've mentioned, environmental protection, and we know that Glastonbury are now using it as one of their USPs. So there's lots of stuff in there, lots of news about Oasis, who made you queue up for 4 hours online, and then suddenly went, your ticket's 300 quid instead of the 50 you thought it was going to be, and apologised, and then released some more tickets and said they would sort it out. Don't think they refunded any money. So if we're looking at these, there's a couple of bits of evidence there that you can look through. So we've mentioned possible changes to resale regulations in the future, nice MOPS. This is another MOPS with the employee protection bill, so the employment rights bill, sorry, coming through, protecting those 0 hours, fire, rehire tactics. The 0 hours are really important, because if I was running a festival, I would, if I could get away with it, if I needed 100 people, I would get 110 on the books and then give them all very low hour contracts. Now, when people phone in sick and I still need people, I just give more people more hours. And that's how most of the retailers work at Christmas time, by the way, with their young workers. Now, maybe that's a good way of doing it. Well, if the legislation tells you you can't do it, then you can't. Does that mean you take on more full-time workers? Do you take on that extra 10% of your workforce just in case people are sick? Well, you might have to, because of health and safety legislation that says you need a minimum amount of security guards, for example, per 100 fans, or we get another problem like we saw in one of the previous slides. So it's really important that you understand what you might do. Also, if you're taking on a certain type of worker that really wants to work at Glastonbury, let's hope they want to work at Glastonbury and not just get a free ticket and doss about Glastonbury. I'm sure most of the staff at Glastonbury are absolutely brilliant at doing their jobs. Some won't be. Nature of seasonal workers, I'm afraid. So environmental protection, we've talked about this extensively. We will move on. And then this data extract I found fascinating, and you can tell by the cut off of the graphic that I just lifted it off of Google Images. But look at the sales revenue from tickets, and then look at the power and the market share of Live Nation. That is some power. That is so impressive for a company that I'd never heard of. So there's loads of stuff out there to talk about the power of these suppliers and of buyers if they're buying stuff in. There's lots of competition we could do here, and if we were thinking about this power and the questions around, I've already put it up for you, market consolidation. Sometimes in a declining market or a market that's got less profit, what you see is the market leaders gobble each other up, and they'll create bigger companies, they'll get rid of inefficiencies, they'll gain economies of scale, and all the rest of the story that we've covered in class. Look at the size of Live Nation and how many different parts of their product portfolio complement each other from our previous conversations. So that's something to take into account. And if you're an independent events company trying to compete with Live Nation, then good luck. I bet most of these events companies, they do their social media on the side whilst cleaning the bar, after cleaning the toilets. As a small entrepreneur running a small space for events, you're going to be a jack of all trades, whereas the big companies like Live Nation, AEG Presents, stuff like that, they will have dedicated marketing specialists or companies that do it for them. So actually getting the news out to people, building up the demand for your tickets, which means you can sell them at a premium, and people are willing to pay hundreds and hundreds of pounds for this. Plus they've heard of the people playing, which probably helps. So we've got over 70% of UK festival revenues comes from one company. And remember, they've got contracts, recording contracts with quite a lot of these headline artists already. They work for the same company. So they're going to have an old boys network and preferential treatment. That is just life. So here's a very long case study for the size of the screen. There's some nice quantitative information in there. You've got a question at the top, and remember the hook here is impact of market consolidation on independent festivals. So it's not just on the industry, by the way, it's on the independent festivals. So you've got to make sure you're identifying the hook properly. So we're now moving on to theme 3. I've not covered a lot of theme 3 in here. You'll see that I've put up the 9-grid version of Ansof's matrix. It's the same one that's in your textbook and on the poster on the wall from Tutor to You. It's just that this is more realistic, because sometimes we will modify a product, for example, or we will expand into a market. So it doesn't have to be just in those 4 quadrants. Like with most things in business, it's on a bit of a spectrum. So we can see with Ansoff expanding festivals and product development, introducing VIP ticketing options, taking advantage of those post-COVID people that want a more luxurious experience, jumping in maybe clean puddles, and maybe people not urinating up your tent. So Porter's generic strategies or strategic matrix, as Edexcel will call it. Well, obviously we're looking at differentiation here. Eco-friendly festivals. Cost leadership. Interesting with this one. I did struggle a little bit with this when we're looking at Glastonbury. Yes, they want to lower their costs, but do they really pass that on to the consumer? No. So I looked at some comparisons to try and make it look a little bit cheaper. We'll see. I've already left market development up there, so you can see where this is going. I apologise for my poor use of IT. So Glastonbury is interesting. It's clearly differentiation focus. It's unique. It's seasonal, and all the other things that make it more niche. But as we can see by the market development point over there, when you've got an average age of people getting older, maybe you want to attract some younger people in so they can come back for the next 20 years and build that demand up even more, bring their kids with them or whatever they're doing. So a bit of Ansoff here. So when we're talking about market penetration, well, you'd think that they sort of already got it with how many people go there already, but they have grown significantly over the years. And since they put great big walls up around the place, more people are actually paying, which is probably why they can charge such a high price, by the way, because it's harder to get in without a ticket. So, but sold out within 35 minutes. You don't need penetration pricing to get into this market, do you? They're already there. They've been there for the 1970s. And they're going to charge as much money as they can possibly get away with without the numbers dropping. Watch out for external factors. If we've got something like an inflation or a negative wage growth in real terms, those sorts of things dropped in the case study, think about how this might impact how much they can charge for their tickets. But just because the average worker's wage might be going down, is it the average worker that goes to Glastonbury? Or is it the average 39-year-old that happens to work in the city for Deutsche Bank, and if they earn a couple of million quid a year, they can afford 400 quid for a ticket, can't they? And there's more mortal people that would prioritise it, by the way. They just go without pot noodles for a couple of weeks and they can afford a ticket. Product development, well, new features, virtual events, loads of PR, it's unbelievable PR. So there's there's different things that you can do if you can't get along to the events. And we've got diversification. Well, you've got the more artistic elements that have come in. They're trying to bring in a wider audience appeal. Now, this isn't diversification as in the true sense of it. Glastonbury decide to make washing machines or electric cars. That's proper diversification. But remember, this is on a spectrum. So instead of it being diversification, it might be limited diversification, where we're adjusting the product, and we're going into slightly different markets. This is where the 9-grid ANSOF makes more sense, and the 4-grid one that's in your A-level textbook is relative nonsense. Now, our good friend Michael, obviously, he's got Porter's generic strategies here, but also we've got Porter's 5 forces, which we could have brought in. I won't. And we've got the differentiation strategy is clearly the primary approach at Glastonbury. I think we need to understand that most companies will have some sort of hybrid approach. But if your question says, should they use differentiation or should they use cost leadership, I struggle with this data, by the way, then yes, they can, by making people recycle their tents, 99% of people take their tents home, that means they're reducing waste. They're also bringing down the cost of getting rid of all these tents. In some ways, they could pass that on to consumer. That's what the textbook would say. Well, actually, no. That's going to go into more profitability or enhancing services. But it's not a budget festival. I don't want you to make the mistake, if you get this question, of going, therefore passing the costs on, the cost savings on to customers, lowering the ticket prices and encouraging more people to go to Glastonbury, because that would be a stupid answer. Because they are a premium festival. They're not going to lower the blooming price just because they've saved some money on recycling tents. However, if we wanted to do a price comparison, still not cost leadership, by the way, then Glastonbury could seem like it's good value for money if we compare it to some of the ones that are there. Okay, I'm not sold on that, by the way. Maybe focus strategy. We've got those niche audience appeals with the arts and the culture enthusiasts, and we've got those limited tickets that are available. It's very exclusive. It is a focus strategy. It's not mass market, yeah, I'm not sold on cost leadership. Anyway, moving on. Sales quantitative forecasting. Glastonbury's been around since the 1970s. They've got loads of past data, and your data, my gut feeling is, will have a bit of COVID dropped in it if you're going to do things like moving averages, or you're going to do line of best fit, extrapolation of data, all the stuff that we know and love that we're going to practice more in the classroom. And I'm sure Mr. Freeman has been drilling you on the theme 3 stuff. So we're thinking about forecasting ticket sales, yeah, but merchandising, food sales, loads and loads of money involved with this sort of thing. And you've got a captive audience of drunk people watching a festival that love to eat burgers. So I'm sure they don't mind paying 20 quid for a burger. They'll all moan about it, but they'll soon buy it. And then next year when they come back and spend 400 quid on a ticket, they'll still be moaning about the food. But hey ho, that's just part of going to a festival. Think about the past trends. Why is that data possibly the same or different for the period that you're in and the period in the future? Maybe there's new competitors that have come into the marketplace. Look for that word new. If it ever appears in a case study, you know why it's there. Now, Glastonbury pre-ticket sales, I think it's 15% or something, or 75 quid that you've got to pay in advance for your tickets. That's pretty damn good cash flow forecasting, and I didn't look at their refund policy on that, but there's not many companies that have got the confidence to say, yeah, you want to pay 400 quid for something, but by the way, we want 75 quid now. Okay, pretty good. So we've got some information there about ticket sales. Get ready for moving averages. They've got to put maths in it somehow. Moving averages is really easy, just do a bit of practicing, and things like investment appraisal in a new recording studio, all those sorts of things. And I've not put it in this bullet point, but there's room for it in this paper. So you need to revise everything anyway. And don't make the mistake of revising theme 1 and theme 4 first, because that's the order of the papers. Because let's face it, you need finance in that paper, don't you? You need an understanding of legislation. So you should be gap analysis and revising your gaps at the moment. Anyway, bit of merchandising sales, couple of stats there to wow you with. Don't think you're going to be drawing a scatter graph, but you might be given one to interpret as part of a data extract. So think about this. And if you're doing a product portfolio analysis of what sells out first, you've got PED, we've possibly got a bit of YED thrown in here. If we're talking about changes in disposable income of consumers. Demand forecasting for facilities. Yes, there might be the rising costs that we're talking about, but why are they going up? Is it because these venues are in demand and they can get away with it? Or is it just everyone's costs are going up with fuel costs and war in Ukraine, and then the Ukrainians refusing to buy Russian oil, and then suddenly all of our energy prices have gone up, as well as, might not have mentioned it for 5 minutes, Rachel Reeves increasing national insurance. And we've then got the problems, external shocks, changes in behaviour, changes in competitiveness in the sector. It could be that consolidation going on. If we have any more of the big players consolidate, will that be even worse for those small providers? Maybe. If I was a big recording artist, would you want to go with a small recording label out of someone's bedroom, or would you like to go with a recording artist, a recording company that is owned by a parent company that owns venues, merchandise, promotion companies? I know who I would want to talk to, other than Simon Cowell, because he's a funny bloke. So business issues, and Taylor Swift is still laughing at me because there's no ways on this planet that I could have got everything into this last bullet point. It could literally be 3/4 of the blooming A-level. You've got to know about seasonality for all of these outdoor events. Flexible working, temporary, 0-hour contracts, leadership styles, and the leadership style that people forget because it's in the upper 6th curriculum is transformational leadership. I think there's a case study possibly around, I know, back to Glastonbury again. They have transformed that business over the years into what it is. We've talked about forecasting, we've talked about budgeting, especially if you can get 75 quid deposit on all of your tickets. Stock control, we've got relocation, we've got country as a production location question for Ed Sheeran making his t-shirts. This could be blooming anything. All I can say is we need to start practicing when we get back after half term. If you're my students listening to this, most of your prep, even though we are still finishing off impact of multinational corporations, we will do it in context with the research theme, as we've done for the last couple of weeks. I shall exit the screen because young Miss Swift is beginning to wind me up with her laughter. Hopefully you've enjoyed the 7 bullet points, and I will see you in class. Happy days.